You are listening to the Bat Flip Podcast, a baseball podcast from Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Damian and Matt.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Bat Flip Podcast. My name is Damian, here with my co-host, Matt. We are coming to you a couple days later than we originally planned to. We're on October 28th today. Sorry about that. We were in the middle of recording. I think we were actually like 45 minutes in, and I had a severe thunderstorm happen in my area, and it knocked out all the power and then internet for like 5 hours afterwards. And by the time I got on here, we lost all the recording files. And then we had the 2 World Series games that we wanted to be able to watch, but we're back today. We'll recap what happened in the championship series a little bit. We'll go through that quicker than what we had before, and we'll spend most of it going over the start of the 2 World Series games we've had. But before we get into all that, how are you doing, Matt?
Doing pretty good. I've had a pretty good week. It's been fun watching my Braves in the World Series for the first time in since I was.
Spoiler alert.
Oh yeah, we already know at this point though. But yeah, the first time in 22 years, and that's been a lot of fun. I was trying to get tickets, but the cheapest ticket, it's crazy. It would be cheaper for me to buy a plane ticket, fly to Houston, and have gone to game 1 or 2 and fly back, including a hotel room, than it would have been for one ticket to the Braves to Atlanta. That's how much like the Atlanta tickets for standing room only are going for a minimum of like $1,100 right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be a no go, even though I badly wanted to go, and I was willing to pay like $500-$600 to go to a game, and like it's just ridiculously more than that. But it's kind of unfortunate, but yeah, so I've had a good week, a lot of fun. I'm super excited to see what happens over the weekend. We've had a good start to the series, and a lot of interesting news going on around it, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and dive right in. We'll start over with a new manager hiring that we had, though. That's the Cardinals hiring their bench coach, Oliver Marmol, as their new manager.
Yeah, so Oliver Marmol, he's actually a former player from the Cardinals minor league system back in the back in the back in the mid 2000s. I think he was like a 6th round pick. And he never really made it big as a player, never made it to the major leagues or anything. But he was brought in kind of as a hitting coach in the lower minors for the Gulf Coast League, and then he was put as a manager in one of the lower minor league teams for the Cardinals, and he's kind of worked his way up. He became the first base coach in 2017 and the bench coach in 2019, and it's kind of an organizational guy that the Cardinals front office apparently really likes. He seems to be fairly well respected by the players and stuff as well. He's only 35 years old, which is interesting because the Cardinals are going to have at least 2 players next year that are going to be in their final seasons that are over 35. You got Wainwright and Yadier Molina are both over 35 years old, plus whoever else they might add. You never know if they have the universal DH. You might see Albert Pujols have his final year as a Cardinal, so that would be pretty cool to see. But yeah, so we'll see how this goes. The Schilt firing is kind of weird, but it sounds like this guy's probably more receptive to what the front office says. So I mean, I think Schilt was more of a little bit more old school. Sometimes it's good to have a good mix of that, old school and new school. If you look at the teams in the World Series right now, it's an old school manager and a really analytically minded front office. I think that's a good mix to have. But anyways, we'll see. We'll see what happens here. It's definitely interesting, and the Cardinals do have enough talent to where, coming off the 90-win season this year, you could see them definitely being a contender next year. So hopefully, hopefully for Oliver Marmol and the Cardinals, this works out for them. It's an exciting opportunity for a very young manager.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. It was a little weird with the Schilt firing, but if they see that Marmol will be more open to their analytical views or whatever, then I guess good for them. We'll see. But let's go ahead and move on to let's wrap up the NLCS from when we last talked to you guys. It was right after the Dodgers had come back in the 8th inning against the Braves to win that game at home and make the series 2-1. And then after that, in Game 4, it was the Braves going to the bullpen game. The Dodgers having Julio Urias up there. Braves kind of took a hold of that one pretty single handedly and won that game 9-2. Game 5, Dodgers were doing a bullpen game. Braves had Max Fried, good chance to close it out, and Max Fried kind of didn't have his best stuff. Dodgers ended up winning that game 11-2 in a blowout. And then Game 6, it was Walker Buehler versus I think it was Ian Anderson. Buehler was on 3 days rest. Pitched pretty well, but then Eddie Rosario hit a big 3-run home run off of him in like the 4th inning to give the Braves the 4-2 win and move on to the World Series, as we've said so far.
Yeah, so that was a very good series. Just brief wrap up of it. There were some really interesting decisions in that series. I believe we talked about last week when in games 1 and 2. Well, not necessarily games 1 and 2, but in the last game of the division series, the Dodgers threw Max Scherzer out of the bullpen, and then in Game 2 of the championship series, they threw Julio Urias out of the bullpen, which typically you would see that like a few years ago with the Nationals did a lot of that. Throwing a starter out of the bullpen, kind of on their the day they would typically throw a bullpen session. But for a team like the Dodgers that has such a deep bullpen, it didn't make all that much sense to me because you have Kenley Jansen and you have Blake Trinan and you have Brusdar Gratterall, you have all these guys, and it didn't make a lot of sense to me to have Julio Urias come into the game when Brusdar Gratterall was sitting there in the bullpen. So, if you're in a situation where you have to have a pitcher come in and, your only option is like Tony Gonsolin, maybe. But like you're in a situation where you've got like an elite reliever sitting there in the bullpen and you're going with a starter, which, obviously Julio Urias, Max Scherzer, both those guys are great pitchers and can get you out of a problem. But I think that really hurt them in their next starts. Scherzer had his dead arm, and he never pitched again after game one of the or after game. It was game one of the championship series, and then Julio Urias did not look very good in his relief outing, and then he did not look very good at all in his start. Gave up 3 home runs to the Braves, including two to left-handed hitters, which is kind of unusual for Urias. So you get down to game 5. Got back to Atlanta with a 3-2 lead for the Braves, and then Game 6, the Braves, hit Walker Buehler pretty well, which is kind of a microcosm of that because Buehler typically wouldn't have gone on 3 days rest there. That would have been Scherzer's day, but with the fact that he'd been used and his arm was fatigued, they had to go with Buehler on 3 days rest. And Buehler was pretty good, but the Braves hit him real hard, and they did. And while he did limit the damage early, they broke through in the 5th inning with the Rosario home run. So it's one of those things. And then later in that game, I think the biggest key for the Braves was that the bullpen in this series, which had been really rough in the previous, in the regular season at times, really inconsistent. The bullpen came through, and Tyler Matzik was a major reason why. And he pitched maybe the best inning I've ever seen from a reliever when he struck out the side on 11 pitches with a tying run on second base and a guy on third as well. So that was a very big deal for the Braves, and they were able to advance to the World Series.
Yeah, it really was, and like you said, it having to pitch Scherzer in Game 5 of the division series, and then his arm troubles, Urias coming out of the bullpen. I mean, their pitching just didn't. The starting pitching, at least for the Dodgers, which was supposed to be one of their strengths, didn't look well. But also their lineup was really bad. I mean, Mookie, Trey Turner, Justin Turner, and Corey Seager. I don't think any of them in the series hit over 200. The whole offense came from really Chris Taylor and Cody Bellinger.
Yeah, I think Trey Turner did hit over 200. I think he hit like 230 something or 240.
It was
But for
probably
the
that
batting,
last game. He had like
yeah, he
two,
had a
three
couple
hits.
hits. He did, but for Trey Turner, a guy who won the batting title this year,
Yeah.
like it was still nowhere near what he's typically at. And the fact of the matter too is that Trey Turner also did not have, but he might have had one extra base hit in the entire series.
Yeah.
So even when he did get hits, like Seager hit a couple home runs that were pretty big in games. Mookie Betts had a double that took the lead in Game 3. Turner really didn't do anything of more than just hit singles. And I think he stole one base, but that's also a guy that's worn out the Braves when he was a member of the Nationals. So it was really disappointing series for him.
It was just a disappointing series for the entire Dodgers offense, to be honest. So, but let's go ahead and jump over to the American League Championship Series. When we had talked to you guys last, we were in the middle of Game 4. I believe it was a 2-1 game Boston. And that is not anywhere near how that game ended up turning out. Boston kept the lead until the 8th inning, until I believe it was Garrett Whitlock ended up blowing the save, allowing a run in the 8th inning. They brought Nathan Eovaldi in the 9th, and he had got it. I think there was 2 or 3 people on, and then there was a blown strike 3 call, and it kind of just went downhill from there. And the Astros ended up scoring 7 in that 9th inning to win that game 9-2, and that was, I think that made it a 2-2 series at that point. Game 5, Houston came out and they got an early run in the second. Chris Sale battled for a while with them, but then in the 6th inning, Houston was able to score 5 runs, tack on another in the 7th, ended up winning that game 9-1. And then we had Game 5, which was back in Houston, and Houston just dominated it. They got an early run in the first and just held Boston to only 2 hits the rest of the game. And
Yeah,
go ahead, move on to
yeah,
the World Series.
yeah. It was an interesting series. I think the big thing that came out of this series was the fact that I think that the Red Sox just didn't have quite enough depth in the back end of their bullpen. I think their starting rotation held up for the most part, but that they're trying to run these guys out in the bullpen like Garrett Whitlock and Tanner Houck and some of those guys, and they just haven't done it. They're just not super experienced. The moment's pretty big, and I don't know if the moment was necessarily too big for them, but it was one of those things where I don't think they had that extra. Just the lack of experience really hurt them. And you face a lineup like the Astros, and I mean the Astros were the best lineup in baseball against both left and right-handed pitching. So, and you also have, you have a team that the starting rotation for the Red Sox was just okay, and then the bullpen was a little bit leaky, and you saw that. And the big thing to me is that the Red Sox, their thing all year long has been that they were hitting so well, and their thing in the postseason so far had been that they were hitting so well, and they just didn't hit late in the series, and um, it was kind of disappointing on their side to not be able to do a lot in those last couple games, especially in Game 6, because Luis Garcia just shut them down, and he had not had a great series. So definitely an interesting look in that one. Houston, obviously, with that lineup, and what's been a fairly underrated bullpen. They definitely were the better team and moved on into the World Series. So.
Yeah, so then you mentioned that World Series. It's Atlanta versus Houston. The first 2 games are in Houston. Early on, I think it was the first ever leadoff home run in the World Series, if I believe that was right, by Jorge Soler, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Jorge Soler hit the first swing of the World Series. There was a 2-0 count, but it's the first swing. He hit a home run, and it was the first ever leadoff home run to start a World Series for an away team in Game 1, obviously, but being the first batter of the World Series. So there's been a couple in Game 1. The home team hit a leadoff home run. I think Chris Taylor did a couple years ago.
Yeah, they
Is
were
that
the home
right?
team. Yep.
Yeah, I think so. There's been a couple where the home team led off Game 1 with a home run, and I think Alcides Escobar might have done that for the Royals. That ball that he hit off of Cespedes a few years ago, um, but yeah, so that's happened a couple times, but never for the away team. First batter of the game hit a home run, and then the Braves broke another record by scoring in the first 3 innings of the World Series. They scored 2 in the first, 1 in the second, 2 in the third on a Duvall home run. So it was a very interesting start to Game 1 and an exciting start for the Braves.
Yeah, I actually did not get to watch much of either one of these games, really. But obviously the Jorge Soler home run was big. I think Austin Riley had a big double in the
Yes.
first as well.
Yeah, Riley doubled in the first after Albies got a hit.
Yeah, and then the big story of that game that I noticed, or not that I noticed, but that came out of the game for me is what Charlie Morton did. He ended up getting a comebacker coming off his leg. I think it was like 106 or 110
Yeah.
off the bat or something. Um, obviously he was limping around for a while, but then gets back on the mound. I think he throws 10 pitches and gets out of that inning with a strikeout and then like a ground out or something, and then sits in the dugout the entire. I think it was like 27 minutes. They said he was in the dugout, comes back out, and then on 6 pitches strikes out Jose Altuve. Says he can't go anymore. They pull him out of the game, and then X-rays find out that he had a broken leg the entire time while he was doing that, still throwing 98.
Yeah, that was one of the most incredible things that I've ever seen. The last pitch to Altuve, he struck out Altuve on some nasty pitches. I mean, it was like high fastballs at 98, then dropped a perfect curveball right out on the corner, on the down and away, and it was on the last pitch when he landed, you could just tell he was in major pain, limping around, barely could land on his right foot when he came. He obviously pushes off his right leg and plants with his left, but then when on the follow through, his right leg comes back down, and he just couldn't. He could barely put weight on it when he came back down, and you knew that something was wrong. The trainer came out, took him out of the game, and you were kind of hoping since he pitched another inning and a third or whatever it was. That it's probably a bruise or something that swelled up a little bit, and he could be back, but they took him back, and X-ray showed a fracture. So really incredible. You kind of go back to some of those moments in World Series history. Talk about the bloody sock and that Kurt Schilling had back in was that with the Red Sox in '04 maybe, or was it with the Diamondbacks?
I think it was with the Red Sox, I
Red
believe.
Sox. Yeah, I think it was the Red Sox. You go back and look at that, and you look at some of these other moments of like Kirk Gibson home run. I know that's not a pitcher, but Kirk Gibson hitting the home run with all the injuries and some of those type of things. But this is one of the more incredible things I've seen with a guy literally on his push off leg was broken, and he struck out two guys and got like four, 5 straight outs on 16 pitches. So that was and those extra outs he got ended up being a huge deal in the game too.
Yeah, and then after the game, he went in the dugout and apologized to all his teammates for breaking his leg
Yeah,
or for like getting his leg broken. Like, dude, that is not your fault. You just took 110-mile-an-hour comebacker off your leg.
yeah, that's you're absolutely right. I mean, I don't understand why he was apologizing, but obviously, I guess he was apologizing for not being able to go the distance or something. But man, that was
I don't
you
think
know,
anyone's gonna.
I yeah, like I agree. Like I couldn't believe that, and I mean, you're at a certain point where it's kind of like, what do you say? But what Charlie Morton did on doing, pitching through that was so impressive because, and it really was probably might have been the difference in this game because the Braves were able to use AJ Minter, who pitched 3 innings, to bridge to the deeper part of the bullpen, which was really, really, really important here because you look at the Braves bullpen, and once you get behind those top 3 or 4 guys, I mean, you're looking at maybe Jesse Chavez, Chris Martin, or maybe even a rookie like Dylan Lee or somebody coming into this game. But AJ Minter came in and pitched 3 or 2. I think it was 2 2/3 innings after the Morton injury, and then Luke Jackson pitched an inning and a third. Who self-proclaimed the Dodgers as his dad and said he was the only reason that he just couldn't get them out, but he would get whoever was up next out. So he did, and he did very well. He struck out a couple guys. I think he gave up a little weak hit, and then Tyler Matzik came in, and of course Tyler Matzik did Tyler Matzik things. So um, it was definitely a very well played game by the Braves in Game 1. They were able to close it out 6-2. This was the final. It was actually the Braves played in the World Series in '99, but it was actually their first World Series win since '96. They got swept in '99, and it was also broke an 8-game losing streak in the World Series. In '96, they had a 2-games-to-none lead on the Yankees, and they lost 4 straight. And then in '99, they lost all 4 to the Yankees. So they had lost 8 straight World Series games, which is kind of interesting that this broke that streak in Game 1.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting. I didn't know that at all until you just said that. But it was big for Atlanta in general, in Houston, to get Game 1 in Houston and then have the luxury of, hey, if we win Game 2, then great, we're up 2-0 going home. But if we leave Houston split 1-1, go back to Atlanta, we have a chance to close it out in front of our fans if we can win 3 straight. So that game was very pivotal for the Braves. And especially since they did it right in the first inning. I mean, they didn't even give anybody time to settle in. First batter of the game hits a homer. So the Braves had to be feeling good after game one for sure. But then game two happened. And Max Fried did not look good. I don't know if you can notice a difference. His last couple postseason starts, he just hasn't looked the same.
Well, I tell you, especially with this last start, I think he looked good. I really do. The hits that he gave up were it was one of the most unlucky string of hits I've ever seen. There was not a single ball that got out of the air coming out of the infield except for one in the entire inning that he gave up 5 runs in the second inning. There was one ball that got up out of the got up over the got out of the infield on the fly, and it was a single by Michael Brantley. Like it was all just through the shift, against the shift, weak choppers that got through. There was a mistake on the infield, and then he came back out. In the first inning, he didn't look that great, but after that, he came back out in the and threw a very important 3 more innings for the Braves to to kind of rest that bullpen after like we talked about them being so taxed. um, they were so taxed in game one after the Morton injury. So Max Fried, there was some talk that he might have been tipping his pitches a little bit too, because I think 4 out of the 6 hits that the Astros had against him were on pitches out of the zone. So there was a little bit of talk about him maybe tipping his pitches a little bit. There was talk about that during the Dodgers game as well, because when they were facing the Dodgers, they were all over everything. Like if he threw a curveball, which rarely gets hit, like they were on it perfectly every time. It wasn't like they guessed curveball and got lucky on it or something a couple times. Like it was every single time. When he threw fastballs every time, and his stuff honestly looked better than it has. I mean, he was throwing harder. His curveball was pretty good looking, it had good shape to it. I mean, his slider last night was the best I've ever seen it. And sometimes when you face a really good lineup, it just doesn't work out. And that ended up being the case. I mean, whether he was tipping pitches or whatever, the Astros did a good job putting the ball in play, and they hit it through the shift a bunch. They were going against the grain, and it was one of those kind of unlucky outings that you hope that happens sometimes. And if it was in the regular season, nobody would think anything of it. The stuff looks good. The pitcher, he looked good. I mean, but he gave up runs, and if it was the regular season, nobody would talk about it. But the fact that it was World Series Game 2, where a win puts you up 2 games to none in a really commanding lead, um, it ended up being what it was. But definitely, definitely looked okay. The Astros starter Jose Urquidy looked pretty good. He was featuring a lot more breaking stuff than he usually does, which is a good move against the Braves, who hammer fastballs. So that was a good move by Jose Urquidy to mix in a lot more breaking stuff early, and it was able to keep the Braves a little bit off balance, get him through 5 pretty good innings after really not pitching well at all in the championship series.
Yeah, it's give him 5 innings, and then you had Christian Javier come in, and he threw an inning and a third, only gave up 1 hit, and then the rest of that bullpen. I mean, Phil Maton, Presley to Graveman, they didn't even give up a hit the rest of the time. Presley striking out 2 and Graveman striking out 1 to end the game. And then that Houston wins this game 7-2, and now it's 1-1 going back to Atlanta. Atlanta has a chance now if they're able to sweep the series at home to close it out. That's going to be tough against this Houston team, especially with I don't know what the Braves are going to do in a game 4 or 5 even now with Morton not being on the roster.
Yeah, so for tomorrow's game 3, we're gonna have Ian Anderson facing Luis Garcia. So
Be a good
Garcia.
matchup.
Yeah, it should be. It's honestly 2 real similar pitchers, because when it comes to that, maybe not stuff wise, but when it comes to the situation they're in, Garcia is a guy who is a little inconsistent, but has had a really good year. For a while, he was kind of the front runner for Rookie of the Year in the American League. I think Wander Franco is going to end up winning that, but he was really good, and played well, pitched well, and then in the championship series, you saw him come out in the first game, and I mean, wasn't he the one that started the game with the 2? I know he gave up a bunch of runs, but he started the 2 Grand Slam game, didn't he?
I believe so, but let me check that real
Yeah,
quick.
so it was either the 2 Grand Slam game or the one that they gave up 1 Grand Slam, but it went down by like
No, it
9
was
runs.
the 2 Grand Slam game.
Okay. Yeah, so he gave up like 8 runs in 2 innings, but then he came back and in Game 6 just shut the door on the Red Sox. He didn't allow a hit in the first 5 innings and was really, really good. So then you have Ian Anderson on the other side, who I think is a pretty good matchup for the Braves against the Houston, because if there is a pitch that Houston can struggle against sometimes, it's the changeup, and that's really Anderson's bread and butter. Some of their guys like Yordan Alvarez, Kyle Tucker, some of those guys are much better against or not, maybe not much better, but are better against fastball breaking ball than they are against the changeup. So I think that's going to work out in Anderson's favor. But I think the key for both of those guys is to control throw strikes. Anderson has trouble sometimes controlling the baseball and throwing strikes, and this is not a case where you can let that bother you. And you look at it, and so tomorrow's matchup should be pretty good. Both guys ended up somewhere in a mid threes ERA this year. It should be a pretty normal baseball game. And then games 4 and 5 for both teams, really, it's really tough to see where the pitching's going to come from, because I think you might see Zach Greinke for the Astros in Game 4, but Zach Greinke is a guy who's spent a lot of the year not pitching. He's had battle injuries, and he did not pitch well at all against the Red Sox. He only pitched like an inning or something against the Red Sox. Just didn't pitch well, and he's not the same as he once was, especially after battling injuries this year. And then the Braves, Game 4 was always going to be a bullpen game. You just never know with Game 4 and 5 that they brought up Tucker Davidson um, to replace
Morton.
Charlie Morton, which was a pretty good move. Got a lefty arm who, when he pitched in the major leagues, pitched extremely well this year, but he also had a forearm strain that kept him out for a large portion of the season, and came back and was throwing down at AAA and in the camp. So apparently he must have looked pretty good down there. And then you've also got right-handed pitcher Kyle Wright, who for the last 2 months pitched extremely well in AAA. A guy who's really embattled, was a top prospect, a number 5 pick in the draft, has had few times he's looked good in the big leagues, but really has never put it together for more than one start. And you could see him pitch in a really limited start in Game 5, or maybe you have an opener and then he's the bulk guy for 2 or 3 innings, that type of thing. So I think you'll probably see both of those be bullpen games, but you're going to see guys pitch for 3 innings apiece or something. I think you'll probably see, if I had to guess, Game 4, I think you would probably see a start from AJ Minter, pitch 2 or 3 innings, and then go with a Tucker Davidson or a Kyle Wright or somebody. Who Kyle Wright, by the way, looked really good pitching last night. It was a very low leverage situation. But if you're the Braves, you just got to get it to the 7th inning. Because once you get it to the 7th inning, you've got your big 3 guys out of the bullpen, to do it. And, you've got a few guys that can maybe get you there without giving up a ton of damage. You got Jesse Chavez, who can maybe pitch 2 innings and not give up a lot of damage. And then when you look at the Astros, I think Game 4 will probably be basically a straight bullpen game with Greinke. But then Game 5, I would assume Framber Valdez starts, but he got rocked in Game 1. So we'll see. We'll see what that looks like in Game 5. He did pitch. He did get rocked in one game of the ALCS, and he came back and pitched a great second start in the ALCS. So I'm sure the Astros hope that ends up being the case for him to come back and make a really good start after a bad start. But it's going to be very interesting to see what these next 3 games look like.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said with Valdez as well, Garcia did the same thing in the ALCS as well. So maybe you do see a bounce back from Framber Valdez, but it's going to be interesting because both of these teams, like you said, they're going to have multiple bullpen games coming up through here. And 3 days in a row, that's a big thing in the playoffs. Them playing Friday, Saturday, Sunday, if they do have to throw too many bullpen games, how that could wear on a team. Because say the Braves are throwing basic 2 modified bullpens, say one's a straight bullpen game, and then Game 5 or Game 4 is a Tucker Davidson start and then a bullpen game. And then what if Max Fried gets lit up again in Game 5 on Sunday? Then you're into a 3rd straight bullpen day and game. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the whole gymnastics of the bullpens really works out in the rest of the series.
Yeah, that's one thing that Max Fried could maybe pitch on short rest in Game 5. but I would expect to see him more in Game 6 unless you're in a situation where it's a win or go home in Game 5. If the Braves are facing elimination Game 5, I think you do see Max Fried on short rest, um, but you could
Oh, that's
see,
right.
yeah, but you could see, I could see him pitching on, short rest.
I
But
I totally forgot he didn't start game one. I
yeah,
am sorry.
yeah,
I thought
Morton.
he did.
Yeah, no, it's all good. But what I was kind of saying is, you need for the Braves that they probably do need Ian Anderson to go at least 5 innings tomorrow because in the series against LA, he didn't pitch 5 innings. He could have probably pitched 5 innings in the in the clincher in Game 6. I mean, he was on track to definitely get through 5 innings, but the game situation, they wanted to go with a pinch hitter with guys on base in the fifth inning. Or in the fourth inning, so it ended up working out with this Rosario home run, and with that being a potential clincher, with the next day being a bullpen, that your bullpen would have only pitched, it would have been back to back more so than 3 straight games. You weren't quite as worried about saving the bullpen. You look at this. I mean, Ian Anderson's probably going to need to go 5-6 innings if possible. But one thing I do like about the Braves bullpen is the fact that they do have a pretty good amount of guys who can give them some length in the pen right now. Because you've got Tucker Davidson, Kyle Wright, Jesse Chavez is definitely a 2 inning guy, and you've even got Drew Smiley out there still. He's a guy that can give you 2-3 innings, a guy who's typically been a starter in his career. So I mean, you do have a pretty good amount of length in their bullpen where if you have an issue getting through 4 innings, you can bring guys in. The only problem is that you're probably booting games when you do that. So if Ian Anderson goes 3 innings and the score is 6-6, then if you're the Braves, you want to put in a bulk guy because it's going to be hard to because it's a tied game, but it's a tied game and you're kind of stuck. So one thing that I've always found interesting about the postseason is sometimes it's better to lose big than to lose close because when you lose big, you can save that pin. Like with the Braves own in Game 2, they had Matzik, Minter, and Jackson threw a lot of pitches in Game 1. So the fact that they were losing pretty big, they were down 4 or 5 runs the whole game, honestly helped them more so than losing by 1 run. So it's kind of one of those things where, it's difficult. Sometimes those games are super difficult to manage because if you get down 1 or 2 runs, what are you going to do? You can't throw the game. You're in the World Series, and at this point, it's a best of 5. I mean, but I think both teams have a reason to like where they sit. So I think if you're the Braves, you like where you sit because you took 1 out of 2 in Houston. Now you have home field advantage. You get 3 home games. And Houston at most gets 2 home games now. So you took home field advantage from them. And if you're Houston, you like where you sit because the Braves have some um, uncertainty in that pitching rotation right now, which of course Houston does too. But I think most people would agree that Houston probably has a better offense. So um, if you're the Braves, you're kind of banking on having that better rotation coming in with Charlie, Morton, and Freed, and then whatever you could get from the rest of your guys was pretty good. But now without Morton, you're probably going to have to stretch a little bit thinner, and it's going to make it more difficult. But it's one of the things we love about baseball: the fact that this is a very, very evenly matched World Series, and both of these teams are very good and playing good baseball right now. And we'll see what happens here in the next few days. It's going to be very, very entertaining close to this World Series.
Yeah, it absolutely is going to be. And glad it's on the weekend so we can maybe have some time to watch a little bit more. I've been so busy during this week,
Yeah, I
but
feel that.
sorry this is going to be a little shorter episode. We're going to wrap it up right here. Like I said, we're trying to cram this back in after a couple days after we originally had already did it, but um, we'll see how the series goes over the weekend. I'm not quite sure when we'll do our next one, if we'll do it on
Probably.
Monday or on Thursday after the series is over for
Yeah,
sure.
we would probably try depending on how the series goes. But I think if we have a series that's going back to Houston for Game 6,
Yeah.
that we would probably try to do it Monday, because the Game 6 would be on Tuesday and Game 7 would be on Wednesday. So I think we would probably go with a Monday. But if the Braves win it over the weekend with 3 straight wins, then I think we'd probably just wait till Tuesday to do our normal
Yeah.
recording time. So
We'll figure that all out off air, but like I said, sorry for making this one so short again and it being a little bit more rushed. But thank you guys for tuning into this episode of the Bat Flip Podcast, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody.